We made it finally. Lazio achieved the first victory of the new season, 1-0 against Frosinone. With me, Alistair McKenzie, that was yesterday at the stadium. Alistair, it's strange because it's only 1-0 against Frosinone, but it wasn't that bad performance from Lazio, I think. Don't know if you agree.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was an utterly dominant performance from Lazio, especially in the first half. So, yeah, I think what everyone was looking for from this game was a reaction after two defeats, and we did see that in the first half. We're absolutely battering them, and to be honest, should have been going in at half-time with quite a comfortable lead already in place. That didn't happen, obviously, and you could tell in the stadium that people are getting a bit nervy, and the atmosphere was, if it's not going Lazio's way, sometimes it can start to change a bit. But thankfully, the goal came at a really good time, I think. Scoring, taking the lead so soon after the second half has begun, really put everyone at ease a bit. And yeah, I think we all would have liked to see a few more goals from that game, but overall, good performance, lots of chances created, and 3 points on the board. Finally.
Yeah, it was weird. Lazio had a goal after a couple of minutes with Milinkovic-Savic that was offside. Parolo hit the post in an incredible chance. I thought, it was tougher to miss than to score. Ciro Immobile afterwards, again, it was pretty much all alone against the goalkeeper, and so on. If the final result would have been 4-0, for example, I think it would have been fair. Lazio had been, I think, 78% of ball possession in the first half, something like that. I mean, you hardly see those numbers in a Serie A match, even though it was Frosinone that hadn't played that well in the other two matches. But I thought it was a positive match for Lazio. The problem is only one goal scored. That's probably the most concerning part of the match.
Yeah, but I think a lot of that is just things not really quite going our way. I think it's more concerning if you're failing to really cut open teams like this who are going to the Olimpico to sit back and absorb pressure and try and hit on the break. And Lazio were playing with an incredibly high line. I mean, the Wallace tended to be the furthest back defender, and he was standing several yards into the opposition half a lot of the time during that first half. So I said last weekend on the podcast I'd like to see Lazio adopt an attacking approach from the start in this game. That's exactly what they did. And I do understand people's concerns that, it did still go into a situation where in the 90th minute, Frosinone were claiming for a penalty, and you're thinking, oh my God, this kid's all in tears. But
I thought it would have happened, to be honest. With the VAR review, I really thought it was going to happen. It looked like a penalty.
Hi, Michael. We have a nice guest from Canada, Michael Dimasio. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, I really pushed my luck with you two gentlemen. One in the company now of an esteemed journalist in Alistair and Vittorio. So thanks for having me back. I've really pushed my luck, and I'm happy to be back. But I think I didn't want to cut Alistair off, but that was a perfect opportunity to let you guys know that I was here. And really, I was so cynical as watching the match. I really thought they would go back and give that as a penalty shot because it was close. It was close. The play you're referring to in the 90th minute, Alistair.
Yeah, well, first of all, I should say Michael's just arriving a bit late, so we've not just been ignoring him for the first 5 minutes. So, welcome to the podcast. It is great to have you back again. Going back to that incident, I think you're right in that having had another look at it, I think it was actually a really good call from the referee because Lulic does take the ball away quite cleanly and you can see it moving in a different direction. But at the time, with the angle of his body and the way he kind of goes in from behind to hook the ball out, as soon as I saw it in real life speed, it did look like a penalty, and I was surprised it didn't get looked at. But so it was, as I was saying, a bit annoying to be in a position where you're still on the edge of your seat and biting your fingernails and all the rest of it, waiting to see out 3 points in a game like Vittorio was saying, where we had 78 possession in the first half and a collection of unbelievable chances in that first half. You mentioned Parolo hitting the post. Milinkovic-Savic and Immobile both missed absolute sitters. There was the disallowed goal. Cherby missed a very good, a difficult chance, but a very good chance in the second half. And on top of that, there were a whole collection of long-range shots and more speculative efforts. So, to answer the original question, I'm not too concerned about it just being a 1-0 game, because I do feel like on another day it could have easily been a 5-0 game.
Guys, do you agree what I think Leva said yesterday after the match, that last year this match would have finished 1-0?
I think what Leva's referring to is probably Lazio's luck, and I think I know where he's coming from that, and that's just us being once again cynical. I really thought that would have carried over into yesterday, and we would have had the penalty shot called against us, and we would have sat at 1-1. And the thing is, yes, we mentioned all these chances that should have that could have went our way, and it should have been 4 or 5-0. And the good part is, or at least the positive side is, we take home the first 3 points. And at the end of the season, nobody really cares how you arrived at the 3 points, whether it was 1-0 or 10-0. But just from what I was watching as the game developed, and the miss after miss and the failed opportunities to convert, you just felt that the tide was going to turn, and eventually they would have nicked the 1-1 draw, whether it be from a penalty shot, or what we were really thinking as watching as a group in Toronto was that a defender would make a mistake. And then there was a moment where Radu slipped. And you could think all it takes was one moment like that, and we're sitting at 1-1. If they were playing, I think, a team of better quality, it could have easily finished 1-1. But luckily, it was Frosinone.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with you on one thing there, which is what I read from those comments were more about the mentality of the team rather than the luck. I hadn't really thought to that side of it, but I thought he was referring a bit more to the fact that Lazio did have a bit of mental fragility in these situations last season, where even in games like that where you've got a dominant performance, you can somehow end up with a result that you didn't want. And in the last 5-10 minutes of that game, with the counter-attacks opportunities that Frosinone had, the fact that Lazio managed to hold on and keep a clean sheet and avoid those penalty decisions going the wrong way, I think that's a positive thing. I think there's been so much attention paid to this, and obviously the very high-profile blackouts of last season, and it was something
that word
within the first press conference in Napoli game. He's already talking about blackouts again. I disagreed with that. I don't think that was a blackout. I think that was just a drop in performance. But it is obviously on these players' minds. So I think hopefully, a result like that can give them a bit of confidence that they are going to be a new team this season. They can keep things together a bit more.
It's also a new word that the Inzaghi learned last year, blackout. And I think it's this funny thing that Italians love to do when they learn an English word and try to see how they can, attribute it to any sort of conversation they're in. Right, Vittorio?
You're referring to me?
Well, blackout in the sense that that's the word they learned, and that's the word they're going to use towards every sort of excuse moving forward, like Alistair said. All of a sudden the new season starts and we're using that word again. Haven't we learned that?
Honestly, I agree in part with Simone Inzaghi. I think this team had blackouts, I think more individually than the entire group. Wallace, Bastos are players that have blackout. They are able to play amazingly well. Take Wallace against Cristiano Ronaldo, and then maybe repeat themselves and for 2 minutes forget how they were playing and do disaster. So I think Inzaghi isn't that wrong. Yesterday, I thought Lazio played well, but as we said already, I think the biggest difference between being a good team and being a team competing for the Champions League is the performance that Luis Alberto, Milinkovic-Savic and Immobile have. I think yesterday they still didn't play at their level. I thought that Luis Alberto after the goal played much better, but I mean the chance that Milinkovic-Savic and Ciro Immobile missed in the first half was simply unbelievable. I can see it happen to Casado, not to Ciro Immobile, honestly.
Yeah, I think that obviously so much of what can be achieved this season does depend on those three. You're right, and there's yet to be a game where all three of them have turned up. And in the opening day against Napoli, I mean, it was Immobile who turned up with his spectacular goal. I don't think any of them really turned up against Juve. And then last night, I think Milinkovic-Savic was much improved. Alberto was very, very quiet for the opening 40 minutes. And then I put out a tweet saying he'd been very quiet, and almost immediately he started playing again and set up a couple of chances for Immobile and then scored a goal. So I thought that was definitely improvement from Alberto last night as well. But Ciro really didn't have a very good game, and it's a bit concerning that we want to see all three of these guys in tandem at their best, because when they are and when they're working together, that's enough to tear any team apart. Immobile wasn't too happy about getting subbed off last night, and I think that's not something to read too much into. But I think in my mind, it's more of an admission that he's had a bad game. He looked a bit frustrated, and I think that's probably more with himself, because, I mean, the chance he missed in the first half was a shocker, really.
He should have been substituted 15 minutes earlier to the moment he was actually substituted. That's how bad he played.
I think, like every striker, he's not happy to leave the match without scoring. And seeing Lazio having so many chances, maybe he was thinking, well, I'm going to score sooner or later. The other point, talking about the substitution, is they asked yesterday after the match to Simone Inzaghi, weren't the substitution too late? And he said no, because the team was playing so well that I didn't think I had to make any subs. I made them only at the end of the match because I have so many options. I'm not sure. I mean, we already talked about Immobile, Milinkovic-Savic, and Luis Alberto. I thought one of the reasons why Frosinone got a little bit more dangerous in the end of the match was because Lazio midfield was a little bit tired, more tired than Frosinone.
Yeah, and the tiredness factor is something that's been a really big talking point just across Serie A, actually, in the opening 3 weeks, and it's kind of surprised me. It's made me wonder, is it always like this? Because, I mean, it's the season's begun a week earlier than it usually does, but that's not to say that would have such a big impact on the condition of players. And it's also a World Cup summer, but that's only affected 3 of the players in this Lazio squad. But yeah, it was something Alberto mentioned after the game as well. He was interviewed and he said that the international break is coming at a good time because it'll allow the team to, he said, recover its energy mentally and physically. And you're thinking, after just 3 rounds, is it really that desperate to get some recuperation time already? But I think undoubtedly it is, and it's not just Lazio who are having this problem, though. I think you've noticed it in quite a few teams in the league at the start of the season that fitness hasn't been that impressive. So yeah, the international break for once probably is coming at a good time. It's usually quite frustrating, this first one of the season, because you feel like you're just getting started and then it stops everything.
Well, you say the season started only 1 week early. I think, well, for Lazio, yes, because Lazio last year had the Supercoppa and so had to start earlier than the others. But I think in general this season started way earlier than usual. Usually Serie A starts beginning of September, last week of August, and then there's immediately the break. Now they have 3 matches and then the break. So I think there's a huge gap. And the other point we don't have to forget is that Milinkovic-Savic came after Oronzo. Luis Alberto lost the first week out Alonso because he was recovering from the injury. So top. We're talking about quality players, probably the best player Lazio have at the moment, and so I think it's normal. The condition is not at the best. I think the biggest issue is not that much the condition, but the confidence. You could see Luis Alberto shy. I would say shy in the first half. He didn't make those tricks that he was using last season, for example. And then after the goal, he started doing something like that. But I don't know. I had the impression that they weren't convinced.
Yeah, I think he's a confidence player. I think Milinkovic-Savic is also a guy who needs to, discover his mojo, get his swagger before he's going to be at his best. And sometimes all that takes is for something, something they tried to come off quite early in the game. It was noticeable, particularly as I was mentioning at the start of the show, as the first half went on. Alberto, to his credit, is someone who always tries to make things happen. So what he's not going to do is get the ball in the final third and just knock it backwards to Lucas or look to play simple passes sideways. He does try and thread the needle and provide assists, and that's what he's there to do. But the fact is that more often than not, those passes aren't going to come off. So as he's attempting these passes and they're getting intercepted or they're being blocked or they're completely off target, and you start to hear the groans in the crowd. And I think that perhaps is something that can make his head go down a little bit. And then, that's kind of backed up by the fact that I think once he scored, his performance as a whole lifted, and he seemed to be energized and seemed to have a lot more confidence to actually pull off what he was attempting.
Guys, isn't it a little bit hypocritical of Inzaghi to say that everything was going well and he didn't want to sub anybody out, and then turn around and say that they need to recover their fitness and form? If we're into the 80th minute and he still hasn't made a substitution yet, like, what are we talking about here? It's either they're not in form and they don't have the condition, or they're fine and they're playing well. There has to be a difference there. It can't be the one of the other, and everything is along the same lines. That they can be out of form but actually be playing well. I don't buy that at all.
I think he can look at the squad as a whole and have concerns over the fitness or their ability to play into the 90 minutes and separate that from the Frosinone game in itself. Having said that, I was surprised, like you, Michael, to see him wait so long to make substitutions, and I suppose first and foremost because we're used to seeing him make them around the 60-minute mark almost every week. And then the actual players who came on were a little surprising as well. I was keeping an eye on the touchline to see who was warming up all the time, and Caicedo was one of the first players out, and Dermisi was one of the first players out, and he was actually stripped off, ready to come on. And something must have changed his mind. But I would have been surprised to see Dermisi come on, to be honest, because I thought Lulic had one of the best games I've seen him have for Lazio in quite a long time, to be honest.
I thought Lulic was man of the match, and it's funny because you were complaining a lot last season of Lulic playing on the wing. I thought Lazio pretty much attacked only on his side yesterday, and the blame has to go to Marusic. I don't know, against Frosinone, I thought he could be more dangerous. Instead, he was really quiet, and. Lulic is the typical player who is not skilled like Milinkovic-Savic or Luis Alberto, but he puts everything he has in the match, and probably he understood the situation, the lack of confidence of the others, and tried to push them. And I mean, it
was a captain's performance, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I thought Lulic had a great match. The problem I was thinking. I don't know if you were thinking the same thing, is seeing Marusic playing so badly, I thought, okay, let's bring him out. And then I thought, well, the option there are Basta and maybe Patrick. I mean, are they better than Marusic?
Well, supposedly Patrick is now the number 2 in the pecking order for that right wing back position, which tells you a lot about how far Bast has fallen down really in the last year or so. But I keep thinking, Spal have started the season really well, and the games that I've watched so far and the highlights I've seen, I've been so impressed by Lazzari. And I know it's too early to kind of have complaints about the transfer market, but his crossing is incredible. He finds a target every time. And when I was watching Marisic last night, I was thinking this is one big difference, I think, between having someone like Lazzari there and someone like Marisic, because his crossing isn't accurate enough, and he's just not finding the targets, not getting through the defences. And we were having a debate when the Lazzari rumour came out as to whether he was actually worth that much, what his value really is in the market, if he's worth exchanging players for, and so on. And you can't really say for sure, but I do think that position, like you say, is looking a bit lightweight at the moment.
Ramel Gendi is saying you can use also Cáceres as well as right wing.
Looks like they're trying to sell him. He hasn't played since the first game against Napoli. It looks like they're really trying to move him off the team.
No, I don't agree. I don't think so.
And why isn't he playing? Isn't he better than Wallace? Isn't he a more accomplished defender than Wallace? We're talking about a guy who represents his nation in the World Cup versus a guy who I don't even think Brazil knows who he is.
Yeah, but you can't bench Wallace after he neutralized Cristiano Ronaldo. I think that would be killing him and make no sense. Again, I thought Wallace yesterday didn't play that bad. He made his usual mistake, I would say, but overall he had a good match. And Cáceres, I don't know, when he played left wing against Napoli, I hoped to see much more from him. I didn't. He's useful, especially if you want a very defensive midfield, which I don't believe you want against Frosinone. I don't know. I think the starting 11 yesterday was the best option available at the moment for Inzaghi.
That tells me that they didn't do enough in the transfer market, because why did you go and buy these players if you don't plan on integrating them? And we saw this a few years ago too when Pioli was the coach, and I'm seeing striking resemblances to that team in 2015 that missed out on the Champions League in the summer and then used that as an excuse moving forward for every failed attempt through the season. Oh, we haven't recovered yet from the Champions League loss. Oh, we haven't done this, we haven't done that. And they bought a lot of players that summer too. And the same thing I'm hearing now is, oh, we're still recovering from missing out on the Champions League at the last day of the summer, the last day of the season. I'm just hearing a lot of excuses, to be honest. And I was, to be honest with you, happy with a lot of the transfer purchases they made. They adequately tried to replace every player that came out. The only problem is they lost a quality player in Anderson who can beat the man one-on-one, which they were missing yesterday. Somebody to open up and make space for Cheeto, which Luis Alberto, that's never been his strong suit. It was his passing ability, but to beat a man one-on-one, at least you knew you were getting that from Felipe Anderson once in a while, or a Keita, for example, who could beat the man one-on-one and all of a sudden throw in a cross or create space for a Milinkovic or an Immobile.
I think we got that though in Correa. I think he is a player who can provide those qualities and is a suitable signing as a replacement for Anderson. But you have to remember, Anderson wouldn't have been starting this game last season anyway. He wasn't in the first choice lineup. So
yeah, but he pushed Luis Alberto to play better, because Luis Alberto knew that he had that guy breathing down his neck every time he had a bad performance. He could bring in Anderson.
But I think Correa does provide the same threat to his position, because Correa's been brought in the first 2 games. He is a guy, with Champions League experience. He's not a youth player who's completely new to the league and new to this level of football. So he will be pushing Alberto. But I think that Inzaghi, it was a real sign of faith from Inzaghi to keep Alberto on the team, because he's aware of what Alberto can do and what player he can be. And after all, he's the coach who's got this out of Alberto, previously a very inconsistent player. So I think that it's not worth criticising Inzaghi for sticking with Alberto, because he was justified in the end. he's got a game where, yes, Alberto, he was slow to get into it, but in the end, he decided the match.
By the way, Super Felipe Anderson is, after 4 matches, 0 point, deadly last in Premier League. So, he's so good that West Ham didn't win a match. So, we didn't reach the Champions League with Super Felipe Anderson. I honestly thought, and I said it so many times that, it's not a surprise that it was the right summer to sell Felipe Anderson. And I still don't regret it. I like Correa, and I think he's going to become useful. I think, Michael, you wanted to add something.
No, I said I think we're missing the point. I understand what Felipe Anderson's done since leaving, and I understand what we've sold him for. But I also understand what we lost, and we've lost it 2 seasons in a row. And that's what I was trying to make a point. It wasn't just necessarily Felipe Anderson, but it was the same thing with Keita. With these types of players, they have a tendency to, or they have the ability to beat the man one-on-one. And in games like that yesterday, there you have 10 men behind the ball who had really no intention of really trying to score a goal, or basically their only hope was that Lazio would make a mistake in order for them to score a goal. You need players like that have the skill set to be able to beat the man one-on-one and create space for your players that can actually score, especially when they're having a bad game and making some incredible mistakes or misses that under normal circumstances, Ciro Immobile doesn't miss that, or Milinkovic-Savic doesn't decide to toe punt that in front of the goal and send it wide, which really was incredible. So it looked more of a lack of confidence than a lack of form or fitness, what I mean.
Yeah, I agree. It's a lack of confidence more than fitness, and this is mental, a mental problem that some of Lazio players have. What I wanted to add is another thing that Simone Inzaghi said yesterday in press conference. He said that in this moment, he preferred to go with the players that know him well, that was with him last year, and that's probably the reason why a lot of players that were bought this summer didn't play, except Acerbi. But he said that after the break, with the Europe League coming on, he's going to give them the chance to play, because I think it's not possible to play Serie A and Europe League every week. So it's going to be really interesting. I'm really looking forward to see Berisha, hoping that he's fit enough to play, and Correa, because the minutes Correa played in Serie A, I thought he gave something different to the team. You can see that he has talent, he has speed, the pace that probably Luis Alberto hasn't got, and he can really change the match and change the team. So I hope really Inzaghi will do what he said to give these other players a chance, and even maybe see more Durmisi playing, because he did well yesterday in Spain, but Spain is a completely different league compared to Serie A. Just see what Cristiano Ronaldo is doing now.
Tearing it apart. Yeah. I mean, Cristiano Ronaldo made Wallace look good, so you know how his season's going so far. I just wanted to just go back to Lulic again quickly before we move on, because I actually got some of his numbers together for because I was so impressed with him, and it's as good as I thought. I mean, he made 15 recoveries, which is more than twice as many as the next best, which was Lucas with 6. He created 6 chances, which was a third of all of Lazio's chances. 48% of the attacks came down the left wing, where he was obviously in charge. And he also recorded the fastest speed of the game as well. So they're pretty impressive figures for a guy who's not provided too many performances in that position of that quality for a while. And I think that having your we've talked about this time and again, but having your more experienced players leading by example will make a big difference, because we need, I think, having a good Lulic and a fired up Lulic on the pitch will raise the level of those around him.
Yeah, I said it already. Lulic had a terrific match, and you saw those leadership, the reason why he's the leader, he's the captain of this team. So I'm really happy to see him playing like this after a season that didn't start well for all the team. And as you mentioned, I thought even Lucas Leiva had another terrific match, and I really regret the fact that we played the first match against Napoli because we were without Leiva and Lulic. Seeing even Napoli playing yesterday, I really thought that with Leiva and Lulic, Lazio could have won that match, and now we would be in a completely different situation because with 6 points, we will be ahead of Inter, Roma, and Milan. So even though the fight for the Champions League spot is still open, it would be completely different if Lazio would have beat Napoli.
Can I bring in one of the listeners' questions at this point?
No.
Oh. Yeah, we got, just on the back of what you just said, Jeppe Nielsen, sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, he said, how do we rate our direct competitors for the Champions League and their starts to the season, considering everyone has lost and drawn games except Juve, of course? And won't we all be at status quo after they meet Juve as well? So what have you guys thought of? I mean, I think we can take Juve out of the discussion because they're going to win the Scudetto. So
I think they won it yesterday, didn't they?
Yeah, I think so, pretty much. So what do you think so far?
Michael, you go first.
Okay. In terms of rating, I have no doubts that we are a better overall team than Inter, just based on their purchases this year and the wonderful party that Nangolan, Keita, De Vrij, Candreva will all throw and enjoy the Milan scenery. We've already seen Nangolan's wasted no time. I think ultimately, unless they go and spend maybe more money in January, the players that they actually should have kept in Rafinha probably would have been more suited to help them this year than some of the purchases they made. So I think ultimately they will implode, and the daunting task of fighting into the Champions League and then also Serie A at the same time will affect them. I think our main competitor this year will be Milan, Roma. Those will be the two that I'm keeping a closer eye on, and who those direct clashes will affect us, I think, more in trying to finish in the top four.
I think Inter has a better team than Lazio, but playing the Champions League is going to cost them energy. As we said already in this podcast, I think the biggest problem for Inter is, and Spalletti, is to live with all these players. Icardi is difficult. Keita, we know it very well, how hard it is. And Nainggolan in Milan, he's going to party every night. So it's going to be really difficult to keep the team together for Spalletti for all the season. But I think that globally Inter has a better team. But
yeah, I think that's what I meant. I think it was more of a base just based on character alone. We're close in terms of quality. Theirs is better. But the overall mentality and the makeup, the character of players we have, I think will ultimately push us ahead of them.
Roma, honestly, I didn't understand the transfer market they made. They sold the two best players they had and didn't replace them with great players. Then they sold Strootman at the end with the transfer market close. I think we are closer. And honestly, I thought Lazio would have been closer to Napoli. I think it's really open. Now, the thing is it closer because Lazio has improved or the other team have become worse than last year? Because I think probably that's the main reason why it's so open. Juventus made a big leap with Cristiano Ronaldo, Cancelo and so on, but the other teams didn't improve. So I think it could be Lazio could have more chances this season compared to last year. But maybe it's too early to see. After the break, when the Champions League come in and the Europe League come in, we're going to see who has more energy and who has more solution.
I think the gap between second and sixth, say, has become smaller. But I don't think that's because of an improvement in quality across the board, which is what a lot of people were kind of expecting at the start of the season. I think all of these teams, I mean, Juve included in this actually, but they'll still win the league quite handsomely. But I think all these teams have quite serious flaws that they're trying to work their way through. And for Roma, I mean, I was at the Roma-Atalanta game for work on Monday night, and they were a complete disgrace in that first half. I've never seen such an open game of football before, I don't think. And they got absolutely torn apart by an Atalanta B team. They did manage to get themselves back in the game, but basically Di Francesco doesn't know what he's doing with that team yet. He's got this team full of midfielders and wingers, and he keeps changing his formation, and he hasn't really decided what's best. So they're going to take a while to gel. I think Ancelotti's going to take a while to get a hold of that Napoli team as well. They keep conceding goals. Milan, I suppose, I think they have, Michael's right, I think they have improved and they'll be closer this year, but the question mark for me there is really Gattuso and how much of a coach he really is, because when things get tricky and when it gets into the big games, is Gattuso going to be the tactical mastermind that's going to swing things in your favour? And I'm not writing him off, but I think that might prove to be the difference for them between having a brilliant season and an average season. And as for Inter, I think they're already getting towards panic button after the defeat to Sassuolo and the collapse against Torino. You can already hear the noises of Inter fans getting very frustrated at Spalletti. I watched the Bologna game on Saturday, and they ended up winning 3-0, but until the point where they got that first goal, they looked very toothless. They didn't look very impressive at all. And that is a really, really bad Bologna team as well. So, yeah, I think all these teams have problems, and Lazio included. I think Lazio, we have our own problems to work out this season, but at the moment, as a toss-up of who's going to finish in the top four, I don't think I'm any closer to being able to answer that question after 3 weeks than I was at the start.
Guys, it's Juventus's world, and we're just living in it. So I think all second through fourth, all those spots are really open and up for grabs.
Alistair, you said you went to watch Roma for work. I'm not sure about that. Come on.
Well, to be honest, during the first half, I was there for pleasure. It was absolutely brilliant.
I have to say that when I saw the starting 11 on Atalanta, I said, okay, this is going to be a disaster. In fact, Roma scored after a couple of minutes. I said, okay, it's finished. I couldn't believe what happened. And maybe Atalanta would have done better to play the starters against Roma and the second team against Copenhagen in Europe League. Maybe they would have gone through.
Yeah, I mean, about the top six and these five teams going for that. But to be honest, I mean, with the problems some of these teams are facing and the improvements of some of the other teams in the league, I think Atalanta are a really good side. But the fact that they've not made it into the Europa League might make them more dangerous in Serie A this season, because they've got an impressive squad and good depth in that squad, which was obvious from that Roma game that was their second string team that managed to push Roma that far. And then you've got the likes of Fiorentina looking very good, young, fast attacking sides. Torino aren't the easiest team to watch, but they're now, Mazzari's had his full first mercato with that team and they're looking very well organised. They're going to be difficult. So I think actually below the top six, there's more competition this year than there was last as well.
And you forgot to mention Fiorentina, that it's a very interesting team.
I did mention them. I just said they're a fast, young, exciting team. But
I told you, are you going to argue with the...
I lost you. No, I'll never argue with Alistair. Don't worry.
Okay, he's a legit journalist, Vittorio. We are lucky to have him here, and I don't think we can really argue with anything he says.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that.
I was going to actually just add Sassuolo because they picked up right where they left off last year, being killers of Inter, and he's scoring a boatload of goals as well. So they're going to be a pain in the ass to play as well. They're gonna snipe teams and cause banana peel slips here and there for other teams chasing high aspirations.
Yeah, it's a good league this year. It's very exciting, but there are some really bad teams as well. I mean, Chievo looked terrible, Bologna looked terrible, Frosinone look awful. So there are a few games that Lazio really take to the subject. Lazio really need to be, getting 3 points from, and there's a nice little run of fixtures now. I mean, Empoli, Genoa, Udinese, those are all teams that I reckon will finish around middle to the lower half of the table. So they're really that's a good run of games to lead us up to the derby, and I really hope that this is a good chance for the team to find form.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be an interesting league this season. Again, I don't know. I think more because the top team didn't do a great transfer market this summer, and so are weaker than last year. But we're gonna see. We have to focus on Lazio, and honestly, I think that Lazio bought a couple of interesting players. Let's not forget that Badel, that played very little since yesterday, was the captain of Fiorentina, and he has experience. He can play in different positions. He's going to be very useful, as well as Berisha, who didn't play a minute. So I'm really hoping that they will be able to play against Empoli and after the break, because they can really make the difference and help Lazio become a better team. I'm looking forward to that. And the other point I wanted to ask you is, we already mentioned Wallace. He had a great performance against Juventus. Yesterday, I didn't think he played bad. And then I go and read newspaper, and Corriere Sport, if I'm not wrong, give him 5.5. I thought that was completely unfair after his performance.
I think
I guess it depends what they gave Lulic. I guess that's your measuring stick. If they didn't give Lulic at least the 6.5 or 7, well, then they're just completely crazy. So then you can't really take at face value what they've given Wallace.
Yeah, I mean, I think Wallace, he wasn't at the same level that he was in Turin, and it was a bit disappointing. Above all, I thought that he's just appeared to be quite nervous. And you would have thought that, he's quite a nervous player at the best of times, as we know, but you would have thought that such a good performance for Cristiano Ronaldo's, he's congratulated him and swapped shirts with him at the end of that game because he played so well, that you would have thought he'd be confident enough to deal with the threat of the Frosinone strikers who haven't scored a goal this season so far. So I think he was a little bit disappointing. You know what you mean? I think perhaps some of the reaction to it has been a bit harsher than it should be. But perhaps also he's just raised expectations of people a bit because of the way he played in Turin.
Michael?
I'm not surprised. I don't rate Wallace at all. I think whether it's Bastos or Wallison, I think we're getting we're getting a player that's prone to mistakes. I think simply what happened last week against Cristiano Ronaldo was an opportunity for Wallace to raise his game, and Wallace is the type of player that plays to the level of his opponents. So that's what we saw against Frosinone. Yeah, okay, he neutralized Cristiano Ronaldo. If you told me I was going to be marking Cristiano Ronaldo all game, I'd give you the best game of my entire life. So I think that's what we got from Wallace. We got a player that was hungry to show his worth in that moment, and then was a letdown slightly the following game. But I didn't find it surprising. I mean, what are we talking about here? We're talking about Wallace, the same guy who cost us a derby. I know the real Wallace. I know what he's capable of. I wasn't surprised.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go, Alistair.
There's a question on Facebook we got from Alec Pearson. about Wallace, saying has Wallace really improved, or is it just Acerbi's leadership which is guiding him to be better? Which is quite a good way into talking about Acerbi, because I'm desperate to talk about Acerbi. I think I've fallen in love with the guy. He's just amazing.
Yeah, honestly.
Okay, so talk about him. Tell me about how much you like him.
It's just stunned.
Sell me on Acerbi. Sell me on him.
I mean, the guy is just, he's made this transition look effortless, almost, in the same way that Lucas Leiva did last year, but not only in the way that he fills that position and the confidence with which he plays, but also as Alec Pearson mentioned in that comment, the evident leadership that he's able to supply in that team. He's come from a team that plays with a different shape, and he's not played in this role before, but he looks absolutely natural in it, and he saved Lazio last night on several occasions. His anticipation of the game is fantastic. The way he can read and time his challenges, and on top of that, his distribution is very good. And he set up Immobile for a goal in the first game. Then he hit the post. He came very close to scoring again last night. So he's got a threat going forward as well. When it comes to it, he's come back from cancer twice in his career to still be playing at the very top level. I mean, he also seems like he's a bit of a joker and a good character as well. I just, we're only 3 weeks in, but I'm already, this is what I said on Twitter last night, and I got a bit of this, but I'm already starting to feel like he may, after all, be an upgrade on De Vrij in terms of what he's supplying across the board.
I tweeted yesterday that Acerbi is probably the best news of this season for Lazio. De Vrij maybe is a better defender, but I think Acerbi is more a leader. He never forget to keep an eye on his men. That is something that De Vrij did last season and cost us points. And then when we saw it yesterday, when Radu or Wallace are not able to stop the man, then he's ready to do it. And I think one reason why the defense has improved, and I hope it's going to improve even more, is because Acerbi is more a leader than De Vrij. It's more a defender than De Vrij. De Vrij, maybe it's better to score, as we saw Acerbi already hitting the post once and missing a great chance yesterday. But probably, and I'm surprised to say it, Acerbi is a better defender.
I think he's fantastic. I think Italy team, unless he has been called up and I've completely missed that, but he's a quality player. He really is. And like I said before, I think it makes a huge difference when you can bring in a new player to replace a high-profile departure. And a lot of people are very upset, very angry about the fact that we've lost De Vrij on a free transfer, and not only that, but he's gone to one of our rivals. But you just aren't hearing those noises anymore, because he's come in, and you said that's a sign of a really good deal, is when you kind of silence all the critics around it beforehand, and they did exist.
Well, obviously, a lot of people were complaining about giving away De Vrij for free and getting Oli Acerbi as a replacement. You have to say that Tari pushed a lot for this signing, and he was right. Well, at least we can say for the moment.
Yeah. The other, while we're on the matter of defenders, I wanted to bring up Stefan Radu as well, because he made a landmark last night, reaching Ledesma as the 7th most appearance. No, it's not a word. As the player he's made.
Hey, you're a journalist. You can make up whatever words you want, Alistair.
Yeah, but it's 11 o'clock at night. I can't speak anymore. Anyway, he's number 7 in the all-time appearance list for the club now, but he's also he's the foreigner with the most appearances for Lazio, 318. So he's been a fantastic servant to the club. I sent a message just before we came on air to you guys saying to try and think of good Radu moments, because there's been quite a few. He's been at the club for a while. So what have you got? Vittorio, I'll put you on the spot.
I start. Well, I think the one of the best moments for me, and shows how much he cares for Lazio, which is a very important point, because you have players that play for the club but don't care, you know. Instead, you can feel that Radu is maybe first a fan and then a player. Last year, last minute penalty for Juventus, all players were outside the box, and Radu was on his knee praying, hoping that Dybala would miss it. You know, he was the fan, you know. Every Lazio fan was doing the same thing at that moment. And that tells you how much he's a Lazio fan. So, you know, I remember that very well. And the other thing is probably after Lulic scoring the goal of the Coppa Italia against Roma, the final, he was the first one to reach him and giving a kick in the ass, you know. That's funny. That's, you know, something that a fan would have done, you know. Celebrating and feeling relief of going ahead against Roma in the final, that, you know, it means so much for everybody.
I don't want to be negative, because it's all good feelings when you think of Radu. If you know, we've mentioned things as a fan first and foremost, because he does react like a fan against his rival players. I lost count, like I said earlier, of how many headbutts he's thrown or cazzotos to his opponents or testatas. Just an interesting character, and I would have thought that after 11 years he would have been the captain by now, but I think Vittorio's right. He is a fan first, and he doesn't maybe necessarily want that responsibility sometimes. And I know Inzaghi's mentioned it before, that they were willing to give him the captaincy after Biglia just based on appearances alone, and he didn't want it. He rejected it. So yeah, I think he just wants to continue on this beaten path. And it's funny, he's played with us so many years, but some of his best performances has come over the last 2 seasons. He's really got himself in much better shape, and he's not injured as often as we used to see in the first few seasons, where we kind of expected him not to be able to play every single match. There was a moment there where it would be 1 game played and missed 2, because he was just so fragile. And he's really, whatever he's done, whether it's getting into fitness or getting his hair fixed, I'd like his doctor's number. And I think it's important that we all find out the miracle job that they've performed on him, because whether it's his physique that's really improved, and also the length of his hair and the overall depth of his hair, you know, that's for me alone, he shows how much he cares.
When I brought up this question, I wasn't really expecting so much chat about hair, to be honest.
Well, talking about injury, you remember like 4 years ago, I think, he was often injured, and the doctor of Lazio of that period, that isn't the one that is currently here, said that they had to stop him because they found out, you know, with this new machine, that the balance he had was wrong. He was putting too much weight on the right foot, and that was creating problem, and that was one of the reasons why he was often getting injured. So they had to stop rebalancing, and that helped him decrease the number of injury. So the doctors at that age did a nice job solving the problem for Radu. But I thought that Inzaghi changed his career, and if you listen to Radu, he said often, Inzaghi give him more, more confidence. Even bringing the 3-man defense probably is the best position for Radu, who, I don't know if you remember, he came to Lazio and he was a central defender and had to switch to the left because Lazio sold Kolarov and didn't have any option there. But he was a central defender. And so, playing in that role for so long and having the background as central defender, I think the third defender on the left is now his best spot, and he's showing it. I think he never played that well when we were playing with a full line defense, and that's thanks even to Inzaghi.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Inzaghi years have been some of his best, if not his very best years in the Lazio shirt. And we're talking about this record of appearances he's broken, but there's no real sign of that ending anytime soon.
Well, no. Hopefully, no. I mean, they are. Alistair, you're still talking. I can't hear you very well.
Yeah, I was just saying. I think he's not going to be around forever, but he's not old enough yet that we're talking about the post-Radu years yet. So he may continue to break some records. Do you remember that goal he scored?
Alistair, I cannot hear you.
And absolutely hammers a shot into the top corner. It's just one of the most surprising goals I've ever seen, I think. And also, we already mentioned this, but he's a great character in derby matches. I mean, a lot of people's favourite memories or images of him will. With the likes of him and Lulic and Inzaghi on the bench, you've got big characters in this team who care about the club, which does make a big difference.
I got to get going, boys. I'm going to get back on the road. Unfortunately, I was driving before and I made it to my destination, but now I have to get going again.
Okay, Michael, thanks for joining. I think, Alistair, we can wrap it up here. I don't know if you agree, if you have a stats to add.
There's something else, yeah.
No, that can be all. That's. I think I've run dry of those.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael, to join us. And remember, when you want, you are more than welcome. Alistair, we're gonna talk next Sunday. We're gonna have an episode, even if the Serie A is not playing, and maybe we can have some more details about the injury situation and the condition of the other players.
Yes, and perhaps look ahead to the Europa League a bit as well. We haven't had too much time for that tonight.
Yeah, we had so many things to talk about that we didn't mention the Europa League. It's going to be nice to have Rudi Garcia and Strootman coming back to Rome. We're going to see how it finishes. Thank you, everybody, for listening to our podcast. Remember, we are on Spreaker, on iTunes. If you like the podcast, please review the podcast on iTunes. And if you like us and want us to support us, you can do it on Patreon, patreon.com/Lazio Lounge. We really appreciate your help. Thank you, everybody, and talk to you next Sunday. Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Watching us so